Welcome to Something Old, Something New, the Radio Times podcast that delivers a TV blast from the past and then takes you back to the future. Join us as we revisit one brilliant TV show from years gone by and share our thoughts on an exciting new arrival. In episode 1, we're heading back to the 1990s to catch up with Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Does the sitcom still hold up all these years later? And how does Netflix's new spooky Chilling Adventures of Sabrina compare? Hello and welcome. As you heard, you are listening to the very first episode of Something Old, Something New. I'm Sarah Doran.
I'm Ben Allen.
As we mentioned, we are going to kick off with a look back to a show that I think Ben and I can agree played a big role in both of our childhoods.
Definitely.
For those who aren't familiar with Sabrina the Teenage Witch, we should explain this was a sitcom based on the Archie comic story of a teenage witch called Sabrina, surprise, surprise, who lived with her aunts Hilda and Zelda in the town of Westbridge. Westbridge,
right.
Yeah. And they had a cat called Salem who wasn't all that he seemed. He was actually like a criminal mastermind who'd had to be locked down by the Witches' Council for trying to take over the world.
He was a talking cat.
Very
sarcastic.
Very sarcastic.
Sarky, yeah.
And when you look back, because we've both recently rewatched the first episode, he's a puppet. I never noticed how puppety he was.
I know. Oh, as you'd mentioned kind of before we started this, it doesn't... We'll say the VFX don't hold up in Sabrina, and there's a lot of it because obviously they're doing magic in it. So like they put loads of stuff in, and it's just not quite there in '96. I don't think.
No, but it does evoke some really brilliant memories. I didn't expect when I sat down to watch this back to feel like I used to sitting on the carpet after school with like my dinner or a plate of toast or something, homework done, and like popping Sabrina on. And I think that was back in the day when you wouldn't even watch things in continuity. Like, you know, you'd get an episode here and there. And that's one thing I think the series did really, really well. Like, her adventures, there was stuff you needed to have seen, but you could kind of get away with it just watching any episode you wanted at any time.
Definitely. I mean, apart from the bit where she ends up going to college and stuff, and I feel that's kind of the latter years. I feel like that it had kind of passed its peak at that stage. All the stuff when she's still in high school and Harvey's still around, that's all. I feel like you could pick any episode out of that bunch and you'd be like, oh yeah. And I kind of liken it to the only show I remember watching in that same way when I was growing up, or at least the main one, was The Simpsons. It was just, you'd pick up an episode, there'd be 2 on every night.
It was like, Sabrina and The Simpsons. And what was interesting about it, though, it was kind of fun because it presented this story of a teenage witch, I keep saying teenage witch, but we're not going to get away from that, who was like just trying to live a normal teenage life. It was kind of like a very light version of high school drama. The biggest thing I think she had to worry about was if her mother saw her, because she was mortal and her dad was a warlock, I should say, Sabrina's mom would turn into a ball of wax once Sabrina had chosen to be a witch. That's why she had to go and live with her aunts Hilda and Zelda, played of course by Caroline Ray and Beth Broderick. And they were almost as lovable as Sabrina herself, I think.
They were great, they were, absolutely, because they're kind of quite... A lot of the comedy is reliant on them, I think. It
was such a nice way, I think, of showing witchcraft to teenagers and to younger kids, because it was like the idea that in your linen closet there was the door to another world. Is a bit TARDIS-y, actually, when I think about it. A bit of a Doctor Who world.
And a bit Narnia-esque as
well. It was just really light and fun and enjoyable magic.
Yes, very silly. It was a very silly show. I kind of forgotten how much, like, a lot of physical comedy in it. Like, I was watching a clip of the pancaking episode where she gets addicted to pancakes or maple syrup, whatever it is, and she's there guzzling pancakes and running around her school, like, all that kind of stuff. It was really very, very like slapsticky almost.
Even in the first episode, I remember she's dissecting a frog with her friend Jenny, who was only around for one series. And like Sabrina accidentally points at the frog and suddenly the frog is like flying around the place. It's alive, it's jumping around the biology classroom where Mr. Poole, aka Paul Feig, director of Bridesmaids,
crazy,
and the female Ghostbusters reboot, is her biology teacher. I think it was just before he'd done Freaks and Geeks.
That's crazy.
So it's like when you look back, some big names are to be found kind of dotted through this cast.
Interesting, okay.
Because it's kind of, you talked about those later series, and I think Sabrina switched to networks kind of later down the line.
That makes sense.
For the last 3 years or so, but nobody really like went on to do anything big after it among them.
Melissa Joan Hart had a few different sitcoms, I think, afterwards, but nothing that was ever the level. Because I didn't realize how it was absolutely huge in the States.
Yeah.
17 million, I think, was the kind of standard.
Enormous. And it inspired an animated series. Yeah. There were books, there were CDs, there were video games.
I think I had one of the video games.
But you know what? I was addicted. There was the magazine Sabrina's Secrets that came out. And in the first issue, you got your mag and you got this big purple like accessory box. Yeah. And it was one of those things where your first issue I think was like 99p or whatever it was or something like that. Like it was to that level where I have seen people on social media now pulling out old images of the Sabrina Secrets copies they found and sharing them. And there were so many really fun pop culture moments in it as well. And I think the things that inspired like Harvey and Sabrina. That was like one of the biggest TV ships of all time. And you waited series after series and you'd think they were just about to be okay. She told him she was a witch, but then he disappeared off, you know. But then in the end, spoiler alert, they ended up married.
Is that what
they rode off into the sunset together.
Okay, and that was at the very end of the show?
Yeah, at the very end of the show. Okay. She was all set to marry...
Josh.
No, it was Aaron. Do you remember? There was Josh. There was Josh Blackheart, who was the coffee shop owner, of course. And he kind of bridged the gap between the old episodes and the kind of college years, so to speak. But then there was Aaron. He was only in the last couple of series. Okay. And he was played by this guy who had been in Dawson's Creek as Pacey Witter's older brother. I'm sorry, Ben. I'm watching your eyes glaze over here while I go a bit like heavy on the old 90s
No,
nostalgia.
that's good. I never watched Dawson's Creek, but
neither did I. But I found out that he was Pacey's older brother. Okay. But then Nate Richard, who played Harvey, who was such, I think, a pivotal part of this cast. He's a musician now, and he doesn't look anything like he used to.
He's got a terrible bit of facial hair and a weird hat trend. Anyway, well, sorry to
You're questioning his fashion choices. Valerie, who was Sabrina's best friend, I think from kind of series 2 onwards, went on to be Big Red in Bring It On. So she was like the really sassy cheerleader. It's really a time warp. Watch
it is completely, and actually, I think that probably is enhanced by the fact that no one else really did anything afterwards. I think it's because you can't really imagine them in anything else. It's just this one pocket of a thing that you remember from your childhood as well.
It is when you look back at it. I think that is like one of the things we said in terms of dating. This like how this series dates. Yeah, it is very much this like lovely time capsule of nostalgia.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't think we'd see it made again now.
No, well, I mean, that's almost a good way to start talking about Chilling Adventures.
I know.
Because I think a lot of people probably think that Chilling Adventures is going to be some like new, fresh take on this Sabrina show, which I think you're right. I don't know how it would work now. I mean, the special effects would be much better, so there might be a bit of a good thing in that, but no, you're right. It is such a pocket. It's a little time capsule of weird slapstick magic and humour. And
not the kind of thing that needs resurrecting. I think it's got its time and its place, hasn't it?
I think so, yeah. Well, I mean, actually, as someone who cares so deeply about Sabrina, this show, what do you think about Netflix spinning the Sabrina thing in a very different way?
I was really sceptical coming to Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which we should mention is Netflix's newest kind of 2018 horror offer. It's definitely horror.
It is, yeah. There's some scary bits in there.
I think it's possibly why, when I first came to it, it took me a little while to get into it. I found the first 2 episodes I kind of had to endure rather than enjoy.
Yeah, really? Okay.
Yeah, just a little. Not 100%, but I think it's because my I Love Sabrina goggles were on.
Yes.
And it was very hard to kind of shake that. So how would you summarise Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Ben? How would you tell someone what it's about?
First of all, rather than being a reboot of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, it's an adaptation of the comic books. It's a take on the comic books. Riverdale creator Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa,
I think that's it.
I hope that's how you say that. So he works for Archie Comics, and he made a new series called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina in the comics, and then he has now brought that to the TV. And so I would describe it as kind of a meeting between Riverdale and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah. In that it can't be that close to Riverdale because it's much more supernatural. It's much more, I don't know.
It's not got that teen drama level that Riverdale would have. Like Riverdale is quite, I think it's like the OC meets something a little bit darker meets murder mystery meets completely bizarre, but that's a conversation for another podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, I think you're right. And so Sabrina is completely based around, as you know, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, who's played by Kiernan Shipka in this iteration, who was Sally Draper on Mad Men, Don Draper's daughter. And she was fantastic all the way through that. And I was a big fan of that. So I was excited to hear that she was going to be doing this. She is 18. So she's actually quite close to Sabrina's age. Sabrina in this new series is 16. She's going on her 16th birthday. And she's actually, I believe Melissa Joan Hart was in her early 20s when she was doing...
Yeah, she was like 19, 20 when she was first playing Sabrina.
So she's Kiernan Shipka, perfect fit for this Sabrina. And so this world is just so much darker and so different to the world of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. What was the name of the town in Sabrina?
It was like Westbridge.
Westbridge, yeah. So this is Greendale. Greendale, which is a town somewhat close to Riverdale.
Yeah.
So the main setting of her living with her two aunts is there. She's with Hilda and Zelda. Hilda is played by Lucy Davis from The Office.
Big up the British front on that.
Absolutely, and she's fantastic. And actually, there's a lot of more British actors we'll come to shortly.
Completely.
Then Zelda is played by Miranda Otto. She's a much harsher version of Zelda than we had seen in the sitcom. They live in a mortuary.
I found that so funny. The Spellman family mortuary, as if you couldn't say bad things will happen here any more clearly.
It's so incredibly on the nose, all of it. And then Harvey's there as well. Harvey is the other main person who's been brought over from the original series. Harvey's played by Ross Lynch, who was in a Disney sitcom called Austin and Ally, I believe.
I've heard of it.
This one has much more of a narrative thrust than the sitcom, I would say. The first episode opens up just as Sabrina's about to turn 16 and have her dark baptism.
What a line, as if you weren't sure. I think actually, not to butt in for too long, but dark is the word with this series. There is not an episode I have watched that I haven't gone, that's dark.
Exactly. It's basically about the fight for Sabrina's soul. Her aunt, well, at least Zelda, wants her to join the Church of the Dark Knight, the Dark Lord. Basically, all the witches pray to the devil, and the devil also wants her soul. But Sabrina has still got her foot in the mortal world with Harvey, and she's got a couple of friends who we'll come to later on as well. And so it's about her trying to decide what she wants to do with her life, and it's just so incredibly different. Dark is the word, 100%. There's cannibalism. There is
that got me. Demonic possession.
Yeah, there's a really strong exorcist vibe in one of the episodes.
And I think as well though, a lot of violence and threat of violence as well, particularly in Harvey's backstory. We're not talking about Harvey Kinkle, the football player whose biggest dilemma is whether he can understand what mitosis is. This is a guy who's got an abusive dad. And is struggling, and I think they add these layers to Harvey that we didn't have before.
And Harvey works in a mine, or Harvey has to work in a mine. His family are miners. It's not clear what time this is set in.
No,
I think the comic was set in the 1960s, but I don't think that's the case here. I think it's just a different world.
It's one of those, I think it's like a show like Pushing Daisies or something like that, where you were never quite sure what the setting was, or a series of unfortunate events as well. It's like, it reminds me a lot of Netflix's series of unfortunate events in terms of the aesthetic, in terms of quite the dark shots. I know I'm using dark again, but you know.
But it is,
the colour palette is really dark, save for, I think, Sabrina, because Kiernan Shipka, she just pops out of every scene.
The red coat that she wears, it's fantastic. I love the aesthetic of it, actually. Just watching that first episode, I know you said you struggled to get into it with the first two, but I was just immediately taken in by, it just looks so perfect and so Halloween-y. It's got that kind of smoky kind of field vibe, and then you've got the mansion, their house is a big gothic mansion.
And I do feel they slightly lean into Kiernan Shipka's past in Mad Men with a lot of the fashion and a lot of the style. There is a little sense, maybe it's just me looking, that it's her character a little bit more grown up. And in a supernatural setting. Just there's a scene where I think it's in the second episode, where she appears in a wedding dress and her hair is very 50s and her whole look is very kind of 50s bombshell. Obviously that might be to do with the outfit as well, but it's a nice way, I think, to kind of nod to what has made her the star she is.
Absolutely.
And then kind of her to take it in a whole new direction.
Definitely. And I think you're right. Like, there's definitely connections there between the two characters, because like Sally Draper was really fiery. She was the only person that could kind of stand up to her father Don and could actually hold him to account for some of the terrible stuff that he does.
Completely.
And in this, she's just really like really empowered. She knows what she wants to do with her. Well, she at least fights for what she believes in. She's trying to figure out if she wants to be a witch. Obviously, the power is attractive, but kind of realizing that the world that she might be buying into is not what it appears on the front, that there's a lot of negative, awful, archaic stuff that goes on in there, and it still is a patriarchal society as well.
Like it's about giving herself to the Dark Lord, and there's quite a lot where she really stands up. There's some scenes where she creates a society to help the young women in her school. You know, and then she's very much saying, why do I have to give like my agency and my body to this male kind of figure that has never proven to me why I should trust him or why I should do anything. Like, her agency is totally at the heart of this story, which I think is really interesting.
100%. And it's particularly just interesting to see where it will go, because it's there's definitely a feminist through line there, but you're always just like, but she's kind of leaning towards the Church of the Dark Lord.
Completely. And the other thing that gets me is she is so caught up in doing what's right for Harvey all the time. I don't know about you, but when he calls her Brina, that really grates on me.
I can't do it.
She is surrounded by a really interesting supporting cast, like we mentioned, Lucy Davis, Miranda Otto. To keep up the British theme, we've got Richard Coyle as Faustus Blackwood, Father Blackwood. I find this really interesting, right? Because Dr. Faustus, of course, is a literary character who first appeared in Edinburgh's Blackwood magazine. So I'm noticing these things. And there's a character later on in the series called Daniel Webster, who's a lawyer. And that he's actually a character from a story called The Devil and Daniel Webster, which is an old thing about a guy who was kind of like up against the devil. And there's a plot about that. And
Great trivia.
Yeah, and then there's another character called Nick Scratch, who is at Sabrina's Academy of Unseen Arts, which is our spooky Hogwarts.
A potential love interest.
Could throw anything in front of Harvey. Anyway, Nick Scratch is, I think, possibly a play on Old Scratch, Mr. Scratch, and Old Nick, which are all terms for the devil. So could he be?
This is brilliant.
Secretly, I stole all this trivia from my other half, who did like English literature at university. I'm not going to lie, but it really struck me.
That's very interesting.
That aside, back to the British cast.
Yes.
My standout, I think, has to be Michelle Gomez.
Yes, she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant.
Everyone knows her from Doctor Who. She played Missy. She was in Green Wing as well back in the day. She is Madam Satan. And my gosh, does she know how to chew up a scene. She
really does. And that's actually, I interviewed Ross Lynch and Kieran Chipka for the website, and they both just raved about her, how she just... They never know what to expect with her. She's going to do something different every take, and she knows that the way Ross Lynch described was she milks a moment. She knows how to milk a moment. She really gets the most out of every line. It's incredible.
She's incredible. And then we have, of course, Chance Perdomo, who I think people are going to be really interested in.
Yeah, me too.
He's essentially the Salem of this series. I don't want to say that.
Yeah, I know what you mean though. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we should mention there is a Salem in this series, but he doesn't talk and he's kind of scary.
Bring back Nick Bakay. That's what I say. Bring back the voice of Salem. But anyway, go ahead.
So there is a Salem, but you're right. I think Chance Perdomo is going to be a really interesting part of the series. He plays Ambrose Spellman, who is Sabrina's cousin, who is, there's a definite Salem tie here. He's a warlock who's been bound to the Spellman estate it's unknown at the start. It kind of comes out some way through the series what he's been locked up for. But yeah, he's this kind of elusive... I don't know, he has this kind of weird Shakespearean kind of way of speaking. He calls her cousin.
And he leans on everything.
We
pointed this out. I urge you, if you watch Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which I hope you will, having listened to us talk about it, check out how much he leans. Sorry, Ben, back to you.
He's a leaner. I think you're right. He's going to be a massive part of this. I think if there's going to be a character that's getting memed, it's going to be Ambrose, because he's just so unlike all the rest of them, I think. And we won't go into too much detail.
No, we don't want to spoil everything.
But he's a very interesting plot that kind of runs throughout and develops towards the end in particular.
As Joss Whedon once wrote, every generation has a Slayer.
Yes.
Could Chilling Adventures be this generation's Buffy?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I wrote in my review, and I
know I'm stealing it from you.
Yeah, and that was something that I just kept thinking about when I was watching it. It was. Now, I don't think it's there yet.
No,
it's not there. As we were talking about previously, we don't have the same interest in the surrounding characters.
Yeah, they're no Scooby Gang just yet.
They're not the Scooby Gang yet, but I do think that Kiernan Shipka can give Sarah Michelle Gellar and Buffy a run for her money, or their money. I think she's absolutely brilliant. I think she's really just a fascinating character, because you can't 100% know which way she's going to go either time. You kind of have a strong feeling that she's going to do the right thing, but you are always interested to see which way she goes. And she's just really magnetic on screen. She's just like a ball of energy, essentially. And I think she will drive this show forward. I
think you've summarised it perfectly. And if what you just said does not convince people to check out this series, I don't know what will. That's all we've got time for this week, unfortunately. Join us in the next episode of Something Old, Something New. We'll be taking a look back at The Night Manager and new Jean le Carré adaptation, Little Drummer Girl. How will they compare?
Sounds fun.
Until next time, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.